Assalamu alaikum guys. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I know I have not been active at all whatsoever, and I feel like every video I say this, I'm like, I haven't been active, but I'm back. But yeah, I'm back. So I haven't been consistent, so I apologize. I don't know if it really people care that I haven't been consistent, but anyways, I'm back, and in today's video I will be doing similarities between Judaism and Islam that you might already know or you might already not know. So hopefully you guys learned something from this video. So let's get into it. All right, so let's begin. So to start off, I will do this in no particular order because there's not really any necessarily order to do this in. But let's begin with modesty. So as you for sure know, if you're Muslim, or if you don't, if you're not Muslim, still welcome here. In Islam, modesty plays a very big role. So women have a dress code and men also have a dress code. So as you may know, for women, it's covering the hair. So this is what we call a hijab. So you have to cover the hair, neck, basically everything except for the face and hands. But then there are some people who have like different interpretations about like whether or not you have to cover your face and hands. So there's some debate, but in general, it's at least everything except for the face and hands. And then some people go further and say the hands and face must be covered. So that's for Islam. Now for Judaism, we have a similar concept, and it's also covering your hair. Now in Judaism, the description or the details of covering the hair is not as explicit or not as detailed as the instructions for Muslim women. So in the Quran it says we have to cover ourselves, right? And it says you have to cover, I'm gonna put in the verse right here, one of the verses that says the women have to cover, but it doesn't explicitly say everything except for the hands and face. And we get this explanation or these details and more instructions on how to cover from the sunnah, from the hadith. So this is like the clarification that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave us on how to cover. But in Judaism, they don't have that. So all it is that there has to be some modesty. Your body needs to be covered, your private part needs to be covered, your hair needs to be covered, but doesn't necessarily say anything about the neck and ears, etc., because once again, it's just less detailed. But one thing that many people do not know is that in Judaism, women who cover, or just in general, women are not supposed to wear pants. And this is both because it's not extremely modest, because you can see the shape of your body, and also because there's this idea that women should not dress like men. So that being said, pants is regarded, or historically at least, was regarded as male clothing. So this is why Jewish women who like observe modesty, so if you see a Jewish woman who's covering her hair, she will not be wearing pants, she will only wear a skirt, because pants is considered male clothing. Now in Islam, there are many women who do wear a veil and they do wear pants. So many people are of the opinion that pants are okay and they're halal and they're modest and they're part of hijab, but I personally believe that pants are not part of hijab, so I personally do not wear pants. I wear dresses, abayas, skirts, anything that doesn't show my shape. And I do think, because I grew up Jewish, I do think that part of me not wearing pants is not just because of modesty and the shape that it shows, but also because we as Muslims also, we are not supposed to imitate men or dress as men, and I'll put the proof evidence right here. We are not supposed to dress as men, and in my opinion, historically pants has been a male thing, and nowadays it's been more normalized. So in the West, in these cultures, it's, I guess, normalized to wear pants, so it's not considered a male clothing. But in some parts of the world, they actually still are considered male clothing, so you see that women will not wear it. So in my opinion, I prefer to stay away from pants. And many other Muslimas as well, who are like, for example, wear khimars and niqab, you will notice that most of the time they don't wear pants. So that's just something that you may have not known, but is an interesting similarity to me. So number two, both in Judaism and in Islam, there are dietary restrictions. The restrictions for Jews in Judaism are much more strict than the restrictions for Islam in many ways. So in Judaism, we have this concept called kashrut. So things need to be kosher, and in Islam, it's halal. So things need to be halal. So both Jews and Muslims do not eat pork. So that's one thing that we both have in common, Muslims and Jews, is that both of us, Muslims and Jews, do not eat pork. So that's a very popular one. I think most people know this. But some things that, a lot of Muslims do not know about Jews is that like Jews take it not necessarily a step further, but they are more strict. So Jews cannot eat or mix meat and dairy together. So they cannot have cheeseburgers, or they cannot have, mansaf, anything meat and dairy together, they cannot eat. And it goes as far as actually not eating them in the same span of time. So not only like you can't mix them, like eat like a cheeseburger, but you have to wait a few hours between the two. So depending on how strict you are, some people wait 7 hours between meat and dairy. So let's say you eat a burger, you gotta wait 7 hours before you can drink some milk. But some do like 3 or 4 hours. And then it's the same thing for dairy. So if you drink something or you eat something that has a dairy product in it, so if you eat, let's say, cheesecake, you gotta wait at least 30 minutes until you eat like a burger. And this is because obviously dairy takes less time to digest than meat, or at least I was told that it was that way. I don't know. I don't know who would know this. I'm not a doctor or someone who knows about digestion much, but because dairy supposedly takes less time to digest, you have to wait less time between eating dairy and meat. In Islam, we don't have this concept. You can eat meat and dairy together. And for those wondering, the prohibition for meat and dairy being mixed together in Judaism comes from a verse in, I think, Genesis, don't quote me on that, I forgot, where it says that you cannot boil a kid meaning baby cow, in its mother's milk. So there are different interpretations nowadays of what that really means. So there are some Jews, for example, Karaite Jews, who are a sect of Jews who do actually eat cheeseburgers and meat and dairy together, because the way they've interpreted this is different. And I'm not going to go into that because this is not a course about Judaism. But basically, that's pretty much it for the dietary restrictions. But again, the Jewish dietary restrictions are stricter. So there's also some seafoods, for example, that Jews cannot eat. So Jews don't eat seafood except for fish with scales. So they won't eat shrimp, lobster, crab. And I believe for Muslims, when it comes to crab or lobster, I think there might be some debates between it, but don't quote me on that. But I know for sure that many Muslims do deem it as permissible. Shrimp's permissible, but in Judaism, these things are just 100% impermissible, and Jews do not eat any of those seafoods like clams, shrimp, crab, all oysters, all that kind of stuff. I personally have never had these things just because it never appeals to me. I've had shrimp, but I don't really like shrimp. But I've never had crab, lobster, oysters. I guess maybe it's part of how I grew up made me scared of it. But yeah, that's it for the dietary restrictions pretty much. Oh, I wanted to add that there's a large misconception when it comes to alcohol. So in Islam, alcohol is forbidden. But for some reason, many Muslims are under the impression that Jews also cannot drink alcohol, that alcohol is prohibited in Judaism, but it's actually not prohibited. So you're obviously not supposed to get knockout drunk. It's not encouraged. But many holidays do actually revolve around wine. So wine is alcohol. For example, for Shabbat, many people do the blessing on the wine. Personally, my family, they would do it over grape juice because our family's not really big on wine and stuff like that. But also on Passover, you're supposed to drink 4 cups of wine, but my family does 4 cups of grape juice once again because we like grape juice. And obviously I'm Muslim now, so I don't drink any wine at all, but there definitely is a part of wine in Judaism. So if people let's say my family's hosting a dinner for a Jewish holiday and we have Jewish guests, they will likely bring over wine. And obviously I don't touch that. But yeah, wine is not prohibited in Judaism as many Muslims think. Now, this is one that I thought of recently, and most people might not know this, but music. So if you're Muslim, you probably know that music is prohibited in Islam. Some people say it's okay, it's not bad. If the words aren't bad, it's all right. But in general, I go towards the opinion that music is haram or impermissible. So I do not listen to like musics with instruments and stuff like that, or at least I try to avoid it. I have in the past, obviously, and it's something that I'm trying to like push out of my life, because I've noticed that especially like music nowadays that is popular and, you know, on the radio and stuff like that is really inappropriate. Now in Judaism, if you're like going, I'm going to speak for like ultra Orthodox Judaism, because that's like where I grew up for like the first few years of my life. Ultra Orthodox Jews or Hasidic Jews do not listen to secular music. So they do have their own music. So like Jewish music, I guess. And these are okay because they don't have like bad themes in it. They don't have vulgar stuff, you know, impermissible stuff. They don't listen to that. So they don't listen to secular music like, you know, rap, where they talk about, you know, money, drugs, sex, all the like bad stuff. They don't listen to that. So that's like a similarity that I thought of recently, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I never really thought of it. But yeah, the difference is that they still do have music, like musical instruments is not forbidden, but in like more religious communities, they avoid secular music that talks about bad things. And it just makes sense because secular music is not good. Like music that is popular nowadays, all these rap songs talking about drugs and sex and alcohol and going to prison and killing people, these are not good things, and they're not beneficial for us as like people, and they're not beneficial for like our goals, not beneficial for our religion, not beneficial for our relationship with God. And these are things that keep you further away from God, and it's just not good overall. So this is a really cool similarity that I think is really cool, and that a lot of people do not know. Now for similarity number 4 is free mixing and gender segregation. So by that I mean that men and women do not mix in settings, either religious settings or non-religious settings. They should not be mixing. So for example, in synagogues and in mosques, men and women do not sit together. This is not the same in Christianity, because in Christianity, sorry, my phone is dying. In Christianity, men and women in the church, they sit together. But in like ultra-Orthodox, conservative synagogues, men and women are separate. And this is what it says, you know, in Judaism. But of course, now they have Reform Judaism and Reconstructionist Judaism and stuff like that. So these differ. But I'm not gonna, for the sake of this video, I'm not gonna get into that, because it's not like, I wouldn't say it's not like a real Judaism, but it's not like Judaism that is respecting the proper codes of conduct that is prescribed in the Torah. They have a more liberal understanding, and they like basically change the Torah and like the rules in there and they try to adapt it to a more modern life. So I'm not going to get into that. But in general, synagogues are gender segregated between men and women. Men have their section, women have their section. And obviously in Islam it's the same thing. The mosques have a women's section and a men's section. And many mosques and synagogues are even designed in the same way. Sometimes it's like the women are on top and then the men are on bottom, like at the bottom floor, so the women can look over at the men, but the men cannot really see the women. In some other settings, there's like an actual barrier to separate. So I've been to synagogues where there's like a barrier to separate the men and women. And the same thing in mosques. And then there are some that even have separate rooms for men and women. But there's like a window or something so that like the sound can pass through or whatever. But in mosques, they're, I guess, they're more like modernized in a way that like they can use like speakers and stuff. So sometimes it's like completely separated, like one floor is for men and one floor is for women, and they can't even see each other at all. But they have like speakers that allows the sheikh to be heard in the women's section. But anyways, I don't want to get too much into like the nitty-gritty details. But the point is that the men and women in synagogues and mosques are completely separated. And this is not only for religious settings like in mosques and synagogues, this is also for more casual or non-religious settings like weddings. So in a Jewish ultra-Orthodox or Orthodox wedding, you will see that men and women are separate. They don't like mingle. And the same thing for a proper Islamic marriage. Men and women are separate and they do not mix. And just in everyday life, men and women are not supposed to mix unnecessarily. And this is, I think, taken more serious in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community because, for example, they have schools, like their Jewish schools, they have one school for girls, one school for boys. And you see that in the Islamic world too, but at least in my country, in Canada, like Islamic schools are like men and I think it's girls and boys together, but they do have like separation when they're learning about the Quran and things like that. But I do know in the Middle East, they do have boy-girls and girl schools. Boy schools, schools for boys and schools for girls. So it's really similar in that way. They really stress the importance, both Jews and Muslims stress the importance of gender segregation, and there's no free mixing going on. And this is something that is really beneficial, I think, that people don't realize how beneficial it is for our own well-being, because, you know, once free mixing starts and stuff, this can lead to other haram stuff. And in that similar, that same train of thought, there is not really any dating in Orthodox Judaism, and in Islam, like actual Islam, there is no dating. So of course, like I said, there's less religious Jews who will do dating, but in Judaism, you're not supposed to do dating. And this is why there's a lot of like arranged marriages in the more religious circles. And by arranged marriages, I don't mean like forced marriages. I mean that like there's somebody, a matchmaker, who sets the people up. They're gonna be like, hey, look, I found this girl that you might like. You guys can meet in an open setting, not in a private setting where there's like witnesses or whatever, to make sure nothing bad is going on. And then if they like each other, they can proceed to marriage. And this is the same thing as like halal dating. It's not dating, I wouldn't call it dating, but this is how it works. You know, a man and woman, they get to know each other in a halal context for marriage, and the parents are heavily involved. Of both the parents of the female and the parents of the male are involved. So this is the same thing in Judaism and Islam. When there is arranged marriages, both the families are involved, and they know that, you know, both parties are serious about marriage, and if they are right for each other, they get married. If they're not, they can find someone else. So this is another cool similarity between Judaism and Islam. Okay, number 5. I feel like I should have organized this differently because now I'm going to do some really basic ones. So this one is super basic. That everybody, I think, knows. The similarity between Judaism and Islam is that both Jews and Muslims believe in one God. That is, they are both monotheistic religions. And unlike Christianity, which is usually considered as a monotheistic religion, Judaism and Islam both practice strict monotheism, which I would argue Christianity does not, because they have the whole concept of the Trinity. So, you know, Jesus is God, he's also the Son of God, but then God is God and also not Jesus. So that's a bit confusing. But in Islam and Judaism, they have this big stress on one God and only one God. And in that same sense, they have like this really big importance on like not worshipping any other gods. So in Islam, it's La ilaha illallah. You know, there is no God but Allah. And then in Judaism, they have a similar phrase like Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. So our God is one. Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. So our God is basically one. And that's a really important aspect in Judaism, as well as a really important aspect in Islam, that there is only one God. And if you basically associate any other deity with God, then you are doing a really big sin. So the gravest sin in Judaism and the gravest sin in Islam is associating another power with God. So that's like the most basic similarity between the two, is that they are both strictly monotheistic. Now, number 6, which is also a super basic similarity between the two, is that they are both Abrahamic religions. So both Judaism and Islam believe in Abraham, and they believe that, you know, that's kind of where it started. However, in Islam, we consider Adam to be the first Muslim. In Judaism, it starts more with Abraham, because Abraham is the first one to reject idols and believe in Allah and believe in one God, because as we know, Abraham's father believed in idols and worshipped idols, and Abraham was like, no, I don't believe in idols, I believe in God. So both Judaism and Islam are Abrahamic religions because they believe that Abraham is super important. So they both believe in Abraham, and from Abraham comes Isaac and also Ismail. Number 7, which is another similarity between the two, is fasting. So both have fasting as an important aspect of the religion. In Judaism, there's Yom Kippur fasts as well as other fasts, and in Islam there is Ramadan, and both basically are for the same purpose. When you do Ramadan versus when you do Yom Kippur, it's basically to ask God forgiveness and to repent and to cleanse yourself of all your sins. And this is the same with Ramadan. You are supposed to be on your best behavior and ask for forgiveness, and this is like the best time to gain God's forgiveness. And like Judaism and Islam, Judaism, when you fast, you cannot eat or drink anything. I don't know if Christians actually do like a fast in the same way that Muslims and Jews do, where they do not eat or drink at all for a certain amount of time. The difference obviously between Judaism and Islam is that in Islam it's a month long, and it's between dusk. Is that the word dusk? It's fajr. I don't know if that's the word in English. Dusk, or is it dawn? I don't know. From fajr until sunset, whereas in Judaism it's like not a month, it's only one day, but it's from sunset to sunset, so it's about 25 hours fast on Yom Kippur. And then there's a few fasts around the year. There's the fast of Yom Kippur, there's Tzom Gedalia, there's the fast of Esther, there's also the fast of Tisha B'Av. There's a few fasts, I'm not sure exactly, I think about 6 fasts in Judaism, but don't quote me on that. And in Islam, there's like 1 month-long fast of Ramadan. And of course, there's also like extra days where you can fast, like the fast of Arafat, and you can also fast on Mondays and Fridays, I believe. Number 8 is the concept of circumcision. So both Jews and Muslims circumcise their boys. In Judaism, it's more specifically prescribed that it should be after 8 days, and there's a special way to do it with a special person, and there's a whole ceremony. In Islam, they don't have that. We just have the concept of circumcising our boys. It doesn't have to be in 8 days. It doesn't have like a time limit, but the earlier the better. And both of them is because of the covenant that God had with Abraham. And I don't believe that Christians have this in practice where they must get circumcised or it's super important. But for Jews and Islam, for Jews and Muslims, it's super important. So even if you're not a super practicing Jew, or maybe not a super practicing Muslim, most Jews, like almost all Jews and almost all Muslims, will do the bare minimum and circumcise their son. Number 9 is also, I guess, less obvious or less commonly known, but there is ritual purity, the concept of ritual purity. So in Islam, there's ghusl and wudu. So this is when, you know, purify yourself with water and wash your face and nose and mouth and hands and feet before prayer and before other important things. And in Judaism, there's a similar concept, but it's not exactly the same, of the mikveh. So a mikveh is like kind of like a bathhouse type thing where Jews go to purify themselves. And the mikveh is more comparable to ghusl because it's like a full body bath, like a full body wash cleansing. So the mikveh is, for example, the mikveh is something that women go to after their period. So in both Judaism and Islam, a woman who's on her period cannot be intimate with her husband, so she has to wait till the end of her period and then has to cleanse herself in order to be intimate with her husband. So in Judaism, the woman waits till she's finished with her period and then goes to the mikveh to get the whole ritual bath done. She washes all her nails, her fingers. She has to remove all her nail polish. She washes her hair, everything. I've never actually done a mikveh bath, so I don't exactly know what's involved in it. I have visited one when I was younger, and they told me what is included in it, but I've never actually done it because I was never married as a Jewish woman, so I don't know exactly what it's like, but you can search it if you want to. In Islam, it's also the same or similar concept that a woman cannot sleep with her husband when she has her period. So she has to wait till she's done her period. And just like in Judaism, she needs to check that like there is no blood at all left over and it's completely clean. And once she is completely clean from blood, then she can go do her ghusl, which is also like a ritual bath. The only difference is that in Judaism, the woman has to go to the actual place to get her ritual bath done. And in Islam, she can do it at her own home. She just needs to do it properly. She needs to wash her face, her inside her nose, her mouth, her hands, her fingers, her hair, and her entire body. So it's basically the same thing, except for one is at home and one is in her home. Wait, one is at home and one is in a specific place. Also, another interesting thing is that in wudu, when you wash your hands, generally you wash it 3 times, starting with your right hand and then three times on your left hand. And in Judaism, we also have netilat yadayim, which is also a purification. And usually you do netilat yadayim right in the morning, so when you wake up, and also before you eat bread or you eat a meal. And this is also interesting because in Islam, it's encouraged to do wudu right when you wake up. So it's like a super similar concept that most people do not know about. And in Judaism also, when you do your hands for netilat yadayim, there's different like traditions on how to do it, but at least how I was taught to do it as a kid, you do 3 times, you wash your right hand 3 times, and then you wash your left hand 3 times. But in Judaism, we have like a tepel, that's what I called it. It's like a little jug that makes it easier for you to wash your hands properly. So this is a super cool concept that most Muslims and Jews don't know about each other, but that they share. The purity, the washing of their bodies after their period, the washing of their hands before prayer, where in Judaism it's not required to do wudu before prayer or to wash yourself before prayer, but it's still encouraged. So that's super cool. Number 10, there is the Day of Judgment for both Jews and Muslims, and this is when you die and the end of the world happens, and you will face God and be responsible for all of your actions, all of your sins, and all of your good deeds, and then they will be weighed, your good deeds against your bad deeds. And I remember as a kid, I actually learned this, and I remember I visualized this as a kid, where your good deeds and bad deeds will be put on a scale, and God will measure the difference between the two. And this is also a similar concept that we have in Islam, which is super interesting. And like another little concept that is similar between the two that kind of has to do with, you know, the Day of Judgment is that every night when you sleep, this is what I learned as a kid in Judaism, but is also similar in Islam, is that when you sleep, your soul goes to God, and in the morning it's basically returned to you. If like you deserve it, if God decides to return your soul to you, then you will wake up the next morning. And this is why in Judaism, there is like a prayer when you wake up that you say Modesty. You say basically thanks to God for letting me wake up today. And in Islam, there is also, when you wake up for Fajr, you're supposed to be thankful to God for waking you up in the morning. And there's also some of the dhikr that you should be doing after Fajr to thank God and remember God and thank God for keeping you alive another day. So that's basically it for that. I'm not going to go super into detail on the Day of Judgment because they for sure differ. So you can Google it if you're interested. But both Judaism and Islam have the concept of the Day of Judgment for everybody, basically. So that's basically 10 similarities between Judaism and Islam. There are obviously more, but these are just 10 big ones that I could think of. So if you think of any other similarities between Judaism and Islam, please leave them in the comments and I can like make another video and address these. Or maybe I'll just like make another video and think of some more myself. But just to say that there are definitely more similarities, but these are just like the 10 big ones and ones that I think are really interesting and really important to both Jews and Muslims. So once again, thank you for being patient with all my inconsistency online, but I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and see you next time. Hopefully, I'm not sure when that's gonna be, but inshallah soon. Have a nice day.